Welcome to my channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The water in my kitchen sink has been running upward for 3 days now. Not overflowing. Not backing up. Running upward. Like someone hit reverse on reality itself. And before you click away thinking this is just another creepypasta, I have proof. Check the description below this video for the news article from Channel 7 Miami about our neighborhood. They called it a water table anomaly. The scientists from University of Miami said it was unprecedented geological activity, but none of them stayed past sunset to see what really happens here in Coral Pines. If you're still listening, good, because someone needs to know the truth before they bulldoze this place and pretend it never existed. Someone needs to understand why 37 families abandoned their homes in a single week, why the Postal Service refuses to deliver here anymore, and why every single pet in this neighborhood disappeared on the same night. My name is Marcus Chen, and until last month, I thought the strangest thing about living 5 miles from Miami was the price of Cuban coffee. Now I know better. Now I know why the previous owners sold this house for half its value. Why the real estate agent's hands shook when she handed me the keys, and why my neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez crossed herself every time she looked at my front yard. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it started. How a perfectly normal Tuesday turned into something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Our story begins now. The morning it started, I was spreading peanut butter on wheat toast, watching the sunrise paint my kitchen walls gold through the window. Coral Pines was the kind of neighborhood where kids still rode bikes to school, and people actually knew their neighbors' names. Cookie-cutter houses with Spanish tile roofs, palm trees swaying in the breeze, the distant sound of someone's sprinkler system kicking on. Normal. Safe. Boring even. I'd moved here from Chicago 6 months ago for a job at a tech startup in downtown Miami. The commute was nothing compared to what I used to deal with. And the house? 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a pool in the backyard. The American dream, right? The first sign something was wrong came when I turned on the kitchen faucet to rinse my knife. The water hesitated. That's the only way I can describe it. Like it forgot which way to flow for just a second. Then it ran normal. I figured it was air in the pipes or something. Old house problems. But then I heard it. This sound from under the sink. Like breathing. Wet, labored breathing. I opened the cabinet doors, expecting to find a leak, maybe a dying rat that had crawled in there. Instead, I saw the pipes sweating, not condensation. Actual beads of water forming and rolling upward along the metal, defying gravity, like those videos of water in space. What the? I reached out to touch one of the droplets, and it moved away from my finger, deliberately, like it was alive. I jerked my hand back so fast I knocked over the dish soap. The blue liquid spread across the counter, but instead of dripping onto the floor, it pooled at the edge and started creeping back toward the sink, toward the drain. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Jake Patterson, who worked nights at the hospital. "Dude, is your pool doing something weird?" I practically ran to the sliding glass door. My pool was breathing, the entire surface rising and falling in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Not waves, not wind. The water itself was expanding and contracting like lungs filling with air. That's when I noticed the grass. Every single blade in my backyard was bent at exactly the same angle, pointing toward the house, pointing toward the kitchen. My phone buzzed again, then again, and again. The neighborhood group chat was exploding. Anyone else's shower running backward? Sarah from 2 houses down. My dog won't go outside. She's terrified of the yard. Mr. Thompson. There's 3 feet of standing water in my basement, but nothing's wet. Anonymous. That last one made me pause. 3 feet of water, but nothing's wet? I grabbed my keys and headed outside. The air felt thick, heavy, like walking through invisible honey. Mrs. Rodriguez was standing in her driveway staring at her garden hose. It was on, full blast, but the water was flowing up the hose and back into the spigot. "Marcus!" she called out, her voice shaky. "You see this? You see what's happening?" Before I could answer, Jake appeared from his house, still in his scrubs from his hospital shift. His face was pale, and I mean pale for a white guy from Minnesota. "We need to get everyone together," he said. "Something's seriously wrong here." That's when we heard the scream. The scream came from the Johnsons' house, the big 2-story at the end of the cul-de-sac. We ran, or tried to run. Moving through the thick air was like pushing through water. Every step took effort. Their front door was open. Inside, we found Linda Johnson standing in her living room, pointing at her floor with a shaking hand. Her husband Carl was backed against the wall, eyes wide. The floor was covered in 3 feet of perfectly clear water. I could see their hardwood, their Turkish rug, Carl's dropped coffee mug sitting on the bottom. But when Jake stepped into it, his foot went straight through like it wasn't there. He stood on the solid floor, the water rising to his thighs, but his jeans were bone dry. "It started an hour ago," Linda whispered. "Just appeared. Rose up from nowhere. The furniture's not floating. Nothing's wet, but I can feel it. Cold, so cold." I reached down and put my hand into the water. She was right, it was freezing, but my hand came out completely dry. More than that, I could feel something in the water, a current, a pull, like it wanted me to go deeper. "Everyone out," Jake said, his medical training kicking in. "Now." We gathered in the street. By then, half the neighborhood was outside. The Changs, the Williams family, old Mr. Peterson with his veteran's cap and suspicious eyes. About 20 of us in total, all sharing the same bewildered, frightened looks. "It's in my bathroom," someone said. "My basement, too. The baby's room. 3 feet exactly." That's what got me. Everyone reported the same thing. Exactly 3 feet of water. Not 2.5 feet, not 3.2 feet. Exactly 3. Jake pulled out his phone, started documenting everything. "We need to call the city, the EPA, someone." But the calls wouldn't go through. Our phones had signal, full bars, but every call immediately disconnected. Texts to anyone outside the neighborhood failed to send. We could talk to each other, but Coral Pines had become an island. That's when Mr. Peterson spoke up. His voice was gravelly, tired. "This happened before." Everyone turned to look at him. 1907, he continued. "Before any of you lived here. Before they built these houses. This was all orange groves. The water came then too. Exactly 3 feet, lasted 7 days. "What happened?" Sarah asked. Mr. Peterson's jaw clenched. "Things came out of it. Things that shouldn't exist. The grove workers, 12 of them, they went in to investigate on the 3rd day." He paused, his eyes distant. Only one came back, and he never spoke again. Not a single word until the day he died. "That's ridiculous," Carl Johnson said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Mr. Peterson pointed at his house. "Go look in my garage if you don't believe me. I kept the newspapers, the country records. They buried it all. Called it a chemical spill, but I know what I saw." Before anyone could respond, every car alarm on the street went off simultaneously. Then, just as suddenly, they stopped. In the silence that followed, we heard it, splashing, but not from any house, from above. We looked up to see water falling upward from the storm drains. rising like reverse rain into the sky where it hung in droplets, forming shapes, patterns, almost like, "Is that writing?" Linda whispered. It was. The water droplets had arranged themselves into words, hanging 50 feet above our heads. They never left. The droplets held for exactly 3 seconds, then fell, not down, sideways. Every drop flying horizontally into the houses through walls and windows like they weren't even there. That's when the pets started disappearing. Mr. Thompson's golden retriever, Bailey, was the first. 1 second she was cowering behind his legs, the next, she was gone. No sound, no struggle, just absent, like she'd been erased from reality. Then the Chang's cat, Sarah's parakeets, every animal in the neighborhood gone in the span of 30 seconds. "Inside!" Jake shouted. Everyone inside now. But inside wasn't any safer. The water in the houses had changed. It was no longer clear. Now it swirled with colors that shouldn't exist, colors that hurt to look at directly. And in those colors, shapes moved. Quick, deliberate, watching. I stood in my living room, the phantom water lapping at my waist, and tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The shapes in the water weren't random. They had form, purpose. They moved like fish, but fish designed by someone who had only heard descriptions of what fish should look like. Too many fins, eyes in the wrong places, mouths that opened sideways. My laptop was on the coffee table, still dry despite sitting in the middle of the impossible water. I opened it, started typing everything I could remember. If we didn't make it out, someone needed to know. That's when I noticed the reflection in the screen. There was something behind me, in the water, but also not, existing in that space between real and unreal. I turned around slowly. It stood 7 feet tall, its body translucent like the water itself. Human-shaped, but wrong, its limbs bent in too many places, its head was backwards, facing away from its body but somehow still looking at me with eyes that weren't eyes. Just dark spaces where eyes should be. It spoke without moving its mouth. The words appeared directly in my mind, cold and ancient. "You swim in our sky." I stumbled backward, my legs passing through the water but hitting the solid couch. "What? What are you?" "We are the drowned who never died. The swimmers in the space between. Your kind built on our graves, filled our sky with your heavy thoughts, your electric dreams." The thing moved closer. Other shapes emerged from the water around it. Dozens of them. All different. All wrong. 3 feet, it continued. The height of our world, the depth of your intrusion. For 7 days the boundaries thin. For 7 days we reclaim. The pets, I managed to say, returned to the true ground, below your below, where the water runs backward and the sun sets upward. My phone buzzed, a text from Jake. "Don't look at them directly. It makes them solid." But it was too late. I'd been staring right at it. The thing was becoming more real by the second, its transparent flesh gaining substance, its backwards head starting to turn. That's when Mrs. Rodriguez saved my life. She burst through my front door carrying something I'd never expected. A super soaker. A bright orange super soaker filled with what looked like holy water from St. Augustine's, she shouted, pumping and spraying. The water hit the creature and it screamed, not with its mouth, but with reality itself. The air rippled. The phantom water in my house receded 6 inches. The thing dissolved like smoke. "How did you—" I started. 1987, she said grimly. "I was here too. I was young, but I remember. My mother taught me. Regular water feeds them, but blessed water. Water with purpose, with faith, with human intent poured into it that burns them." She handed me a second water gun from her bag. Start praying, boy. Doesn't matter to what. Just believe in something while you spray. Outside, we could hear others screaming. The 7 days had begun. By day 3, we'd lost 7 houses. Not destroyed, worse. They existed, but didn't. You could see them, walk up to them, but the moment you tried to enter, you'd find yourself on the other side, having walked straight through. The families inside. We could sometimes see them in the windows. Frozen. Not dead, but paused. Caught between one moment and the next. Those of us who remained had fortified the community center. Holy water from 3 different churches. Kosher salt from the Jewish deli in Aventura. Sage from the Botanica on Calle Ocho. Mrs. Rodriguez led our defense, teaching us the rules. Never look at them directly for more than 3 seconds. Never touch the phantom water with bare skin after sunset. Never, ever answer when they call your name in voices you recognize. That last rule was the hardest, because they did call. In the voices of the pets that had vanished, in the voices of the frozen families, in voices we remembered from dreams. Jake had been documenting everything, uploading to a private server when our internet sporadically worked. If this goes south, he said, at least there'll be a record. On day 4, they tried a new tactic. The water rose to 6 feet, then 9, then 12, but only in spots, creating columns of phantom water that moved through the neighborhood like searching fingers. Anyone caught in one would be pulled up, 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 until they disappeared into the sky that wasn't the sky. We lost the Thompson family that way. All 4 of them, pulled up in a column of impossible water while trying to reach their car. We could hear them screaming for almost an hour, from above, from below, from nowhere and everywhere at once. By day 5, only 6 houses remained unfrozen. 23 people, including 3 kids. We'd figured out that electricity helped. Something about the electromagnetic fields interfered with their solidity. We ran extension cords everywhere, created a web of power around our shelter. That's when Mr. Peterson revealed what he'd been hiding. The one who came back in '87, he said, pulling out a locked box from his bag. He did speak, once, to me, right before he died. Inside the box was a journal, water-damaged but readable, filled with drawings of the things in the water, maps of places that didn't exist, and on the last page, a set of instructions. To close the door, Mr. Peterson read, one must willingly enter their sea, swim to the bottom that is the top, find the first drowned and return what was taken. What was taken? Jake asked. Mr. Peterson pulled out something else. A coral necklace, ancient and brittle. This. The Grove workers found it when they were digging irrigation ditches, thought it was worthless, but it belonged to them. To the first ones who lived here, before the Seminoles, before the Spanish, before anyone we have record of. So someone has to swim down into that thing? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Someone has to return it, Mr. Peterson corrected. Willingly. That's the key. It can't be forced, can't be tricked. Someone has to choose to enter their world and give back what was stolen. We all looked at each other. 23 people. 3 kids. Someone had to choose. That's when little Emma Williams, 8 years old, said something that chilled me to my bone. They're not mean. They're just sad. They told me in my dreams, they just want to go home. Her mother pulled her close, but Emma continued. They can't leave until someone says sorry, really means it, returns what was taken and says sorry for building on their graves. The water outside was rising again. Not 3 feet, not 12. It was consuming the sky itself. Soon, there would be no difference between up and down, air and water, real and unreal. I'll go, I said. I don't know why I volunteered. Maybe because I had no family here. Maybe because I was tired of being afraid. Or maybe because something in Emma's words rang true. They weren't evil, they were displaced, like residents of a neighborhood that had been paved over, built upon, forgotten. Jake grabbed my arm. "You don't know if you'll come back. Someone has to try." Mrs. Rodriguez blessed me with 3 different prayers. Mr. Peterson handed me the coral necklace. The others, they just watched as I walked to the door. The moment I stepped outside, the water claimed me. But this time I didn't resist. I let it pull me up or down. Directions had no meaning anymore. I was swimming through liquid air, breathing water that wasn't water, falling upward into an ocean of impossible things. I saw their world, a place of beautiful horror, cities of living coral that sang mathematical equations, gardens of inverted light where darkness grew like flowers, and in the center, a palace of crystallized water where the first drowned waited. It wasn't humanoid like the others, it was older, primordial, a collection of memories given form. It spoke in languages that predated words, but somehow I understood. "You bring the anchor." I held out the coral necklace. "I'm sorry. We didn't know. We didn't understand." Understanding is not required. Only acknowledgement. Only respect. I placed the necklace in what might have been a hand, or a tendril, or a thought made manifest. The thing examined it with senses I couldn't comprehend. "The debt is paid. The door will close. But remember, you swim in our sky. You build on our bones. Every foundation you pour, every well you dig, you disturb the drowned. We are always here, 3 feet below, 3 feet above, waiting." The world twisted. Reality folded. And suddenly, I was lying on my lawn, dry, solid, real. The water was gone. The phantom sea receded. The frozen houses snapped back to normal like rubber bands. The missing pets came running from nowhere, confused but unharmed. But I remembered, we all did. That was 3 weeks ago. The news called it a mass hallucination caused by a gas leak. The government sent people in hazmat suits to test everything. They found nothing. Of course, they found nothing. But what they didn't find was what I discovered 2 days after the water receded. I was cleaning out my garage, trying to restore some normalcy to my life, when I found the box. Hidden behind old paint cans, covered in dust that looked older than the house itself. Inside were photographs, black and white, edges yellowed with age. The first photo showed the orange grove that used to stand where Coral Pines now sits. Workers in 1940s clothing picking fruit, normal as any farming operation. But in the background of every photo, there was water. Not a river or creek marked on any map. Just patches of standing water that reflected nothing. The second set of photographs was from the 1987 incident. Mr. Peterson must have hidden these separately, too dangerous to keep with his other records. They showed the phantom water, the floating droplets, and them. The drowned ones, caught on film like smudges of light. But these photos revealed something new. In each image, you could see structures beneath the water. Buildings, roads, an entire city laid out in perfect grid patterns 3 feet below the surface. That's when I understood. Coral Pines wasn't built on their graves. It was built on their city. A reflection, a mirror image. Every house corresponded to a structure below. Every street aligned with their submerged roads. We weren't just living above them, we were living their lives in reverse. The last photograph stopped my breath. It was recent, digital, time-stamped just 3 days ago. It showed me walking to my front door, but the image was taken from below, through water, through the phantom sea that exists 3 feet under everything. Someone, or something, had been watching me since I moved in. I drove to Mr. Peterson's house, but he wasn't there. His neighbors said he'd packed up and left the day after the water receded. No forwarding address, No goodbye, just gone, like he'd never existed. But in his garage where he'd told us to look, I found the newspapers he'd mentioned. The 1987 coverage was sparse, buried on page 6 of the Miami Herald. Chemical spill causes hallucinations in Orange County community. But there were other articles, going back further. 1956, mysterious flooding puzzles farmers. 1934, workers report strange phenomena at Citrus Grove. 1912, Seminole tribe warns against building near sacred waters. Every 28 years. 7 sets of 7 days. A cycle that stretched back over a century. The oldest article was from 1884, just a few lines in the Florida Pioneer. Spanish mission abandoned after priests report demons in the water. Local Seminole chief claims site cursed by ancient tragedy. I started doing the math. 2024. The last incident was 1987. 37 years ago, not 28. The cycle was speeding up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what the first drowned had told me. We are always here, 3 feet below, 3 feet above. What if the water never really went away? What if it just retreated, pulled back to wait for the next cycle? I went to my kitchen at 3 a.m. and turned on the faucet. Normal water flow, nothing strange. But when I looked closely at the stream, I could see something. Shadows, moving against the flow, swimming upstream. I followed the water back to its source, tracing the path through my house's plumbing. It led to the basement. To a corner I'd never bothered to explore, where the original foundation met the new addition. There, carved into the concrete, were symbols. Not Spanish, not Seminole, something older. The same markings I'd seen in the photographs of the Grove workers' tools. And beside the symbols, fresh and wet despite the dry basement, was a message written in what looked like water stains. The anchor holds but does not bind. The door sleeps but does not close. 7 sets of 7, the pattern completes. What was given will be reclaimed. Below that, scratched into the foundation with something sharp, were names. Dozens of them. Names of people who had lived here, worked here, died here over the past 140 years. And at the bottom, written in fresh letters that still gleamed with moisture, Marcus Chen, 2024, the bridge builder. I ran. I grabbed my laptop, my car keys, and I ran. But as I reached my car, I realized something that made my blood freeze. The phantom water from 3 weeks ago. It hadn't just receded. It had drained into the ground, into the aquifer, into the water table that supplied the entire South Florida region. Every tap, every well, every swimming pool from here to the Keys. All connected, all part of the same system now. I drove to Jake's house, pounding on his door until he answered. His face was pale, exhausted. "Marcus, what are you doing here? It's 4 a.m. "The water," I gasped. "It's in the water system. It's spreading." He pulled me inside, and I saw his kitchen table covered with printouts, maps, medical charts. He'd been working too, following up on the incident from his perspective as a medical professional. "You're right," he said grimly. "I've been tracking emergency calls across 3 counties. Psychiatric episodes, people reporting impossible things, all near bodies of water, all in the past 2 weeks." He showed me a map with red pins scattered across South Florida. The pattern was spreading outward from coral pines like ripples in a pond. "It's not random," Jake continued. "Look at the dates. The frequency is increasing. Whatever door we opened, whatever balance we disturbed, it's not fixed, it's expanding." On his laptop screen was a news article from that morning. Mysterious water phenomena puzzle scientists across South Florida. The same language they'd used for coral pines. The same deliberate downplaying. "They know," I said. The authorities, the scientists, someone knows what this is and they're covering it up. Because if they admitted the truth, Jake replied, imagine the panic. An entire metropolitan area built on top of an ancient city of the drowned, millions of people living 3 feet above something that shouldn't exist. We stared at each other, the implications sinking in. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The bridge builder must complete the bridge. The first door was practice. 7 doors remain. Come to where the first stone was laid. I showed Jake the message. His medical training kicked in again, practical and logical. We need to document everything. If this is spreading, if it's some kind of pattern, then maybe we can predict where it'll happen next. But I was thinking about something else, about being called the bridge builder, about completing a bridge, about 7 doors. Jake, I said slowly, what if returning the necklace didn't close anything? What if it opened something instead? The water in my kitchen sink is running upward again. It's been 3 days now, just like before. But this time, I'm not alone. This time, others have seen the signs. The grass pointing the wrong way, the pets acting strange, the water that's there but isn't. But now I understand what's happening. The coral necklace wasn't an anchor keeping them trapped. It was a key I willingly used to unlock the first of 7 doors. And somewhere in the darkness below, something ancient and patient is counting down the days until all 7 doors stand open. Until there's no difference between their world and ours. Until the drowned city rises and the living city sinks. If you live near water, any water, pay attention. Watch for the signs. 3 feet of phantom water. 7 days of impossible things. And whatever you do, don't look at them directly. They're getting stronger. And the coral necklace, the one I returned? I found it on my doorstep this morning. Wet, ancient, waiting. With a note that said, not all debts are paid. The 7 days begin tomorrow, so I leave you with this question. And please, comment below because I need to know I'm not alone in this. Have you ever noticed water acting strange in your house? Ever seen your pet stare at empty air like something's there? Ever felt like the ground beneath your feet isn't as solid as you think? Because if you have, they might be watching you too. 3 feet below, 3 feet above, swimming in the spaces between. Story number 2. The floor plan was wrong. That's what started everything. Not dramatically wrong, not obviously wrong, just wrong enough to make my brain itch every time I looked at it. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Let me ask you something first. When was the last time you really looked at your apartment's floor plan? I mean, really studied it, measured the walls, counted the square footage. Most people never do. They trust what's on paper. They trust what the landlord tells them. They trust that buildings make sense. Big mistake. Now the story begins. My name's Marcus Chen, and 3 months ago, I moved into a pre-war brownstone on Prospect Avenue in Brooklyn. 4th floor, apartment 4B. The rent was surprisingly reasonable for Park Slope, which should have been my first warning. But I was 28, fresh out of a breakup, and desperate to prove I could make it on my own in New York City. The building had that classic Brooklyn charm, exposed brick walls, original hardwood floors that creaked with every step, radiators that clanged like ghost prisoners in the winter. 5 floors total, 4 apartments per floor, except the ground level which had the super's place and some storage units. Simple math, right? I'd been living there for about 2 weeks when I met Sarah from 4A. She was carrying a monstera plant up the stairs, struggling with the weight, and I helped her get it to her door. "Thanks," she said, catching her breath. "I keep telling myself I'll stop buying plants, but then I pass by that shop on 7th Avenue and..." She shrugged, smiled. You're the new guy in 4B, right? That's me, Marcus. Sarah, welcome to the 4th floor. It's just us up here, so it's pretty quiet. I nodded, but something felt off about what she'd said. Just us? What about 4C and 4D? She gave me a confused look. There's no 4C or 4D. The 4th floor only has 2 units, A and B, something about the building's layout. The super explained it once, but I wasn't really paying attention. That night, I dug out my lease agreement. Sure enough, it listed my apartment as 4B. I'd seen the brass numbers on my door countless times. 4B. But I could have sworn. The next morning, I decided to check. I walked down the hallway from my apartment, past Sarah's door marked 4A. The hallway continued for another 15 feet or so, then ended at a window overlooking the fire escape. No other doors, no 4C, no 4D. But here's the thing, I knew there were doors there. I remembered seeing them when I first toured the apartment. The broker had been talking rapidly about rent stabilization laws, and I'd been half listening while looking around. I distinctly remembered thinking the hallway was longer than expected, with doors at the end. I went back to my apartment and pulled up the building's floor plan on the city's Department of Buildings website. These are public records. Anyone can access them. The floor plan showed floors 1 through 3 with 4 units each, clearly marked. But the fourth floor showed only 2 units, 4A and 4B. The space where 4C and 4D should have been was just blank. Not marked as storage, not marked as anything, just an empty space on the architectural drawing, as if someone had erased part of the building. I spent that entire Saturday researching. The building was constructed in 1923. I found old real estate listings, newspaper archives, even a few historical photos. Everything before 1987 showed the building as having 20 units total, 5 floors, 4 units each. After 1987, every document showed 18 units, with the 4th floor mysteriously having only 2. What happened in 1987? I started with newspaper archives. Nothing dramatic, no fires, no murders, no building collapses, just normal Brooklyn life. Then I found something in a small item in the real estate section of the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Dated October 15th. 19 Tame. Tenants of 451 Prospect Avenue report ongoing disputes with building management regarding recent renovations. Several 4th floor residents have filed complaints with the city, citing structural irregularities and unauthorized modifications. Building owner Grayson Properties could not be reached for comment. That was it. No follow-up story. No resolution. I became obsessed. Every evening after my job at a marketing firm in Manhattan, I'd come home and research. I tracked down former tenants through social media. Most didn't respond. The few who did claimed they didn't remember anything unusual, but their responses felt practiced, like they were reciting lines. One former tenant, an elderly woman named Dorothy Kim, who'd lived in 4A in the early 80s, agreed to talk on the phone. The 4th floor was always strange, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The hallway was too long, you understand? The math didn't work. What do you mean? I measured once. The hallway extended 15 feet past where the building should have ended. If you looked at it from the outside, counted the windows, then went inside and walked it, it didn't match up. So what happened to apartments 4C and 4D? There was a long pause. So long, I thought she'd hung up. They were never there, she finally said, and they were always there. Both things were true. That's why I moved out. She hung up before I could ask what she meant. I tried calling back, but the number was disconnected. When I searched for Dorothy Kim online again, it was like she'd never existed. Her social media profiles were gone. Her name didn't appear in any records. Even the call log on my phone showed just an empty entry. No number, no duration, just blank space where her call should have been. That evening, I went to the Brooklyn Public Library, the main branch at Grand Army Plaza. I figured if the internet was failing me, maybe old-fashioned paper records would help. The librarian, a young guy named Tyler with thick-rimmed glasses and a Knicks jersey, helped me access the historical archives. "Building records from the 80s, he said, typing rapidly. "Any particular reason?" "Just researching my apartment building, curious about its history." He gave me a look that said he'd heard stranger requests. 451 Prospect Avenue. Here we go. Huh, that's weird. What's weird? There's a gap in the records. Everything from January 1987 to December 1987 is just missing, like someone removed all the documents from that year. He showed me the screen. 1986 had normal property records. Tax assessments, utility bills. 1988 had the same. But 1987 was a void, a blank space in the building's history. "Does that happen often?" I asked. "Never seen it before," Tyler said. "Usually, if records are missing, there's at least a note explaining why. Fire damage, flood, administrative error, something. But this, it's like the building didn't exist for that entire year." I spent 3 more hours going through physical newspapers from 1987. Most were routine, but I found 3 more mentions of 451 Prospect Avenue, all from October, all vague, all disturbing. October 8th, residents report spatial anomalies to building inspector. Investigation pending. October 19th, City Planning Department called to Prospect Avenue address for measurement irregularities. No violations found. October 27th, multiple 911 calls from 451 Prospect Avenue report impossible rooms and doors that shouldn't exist. Police found no evidence of disturbance. After October 27th, nothing. No follow-up, no resolution. Like everyone just agreed to forget. I photocopied everything and headed home. The F train was delayed, as usual, so I had time to think. What could make an entire building's records disappear for a year? What could make former tenants vanish from existence after talking about it? When I finally got home around 10 p.m., Sarah was sitting on the stairs to the 4th floor. She had a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Figured you could use this," she said. "You've been looking pretty stressed lately." We sat on the stairs and drank. The building was quiet except for the usual New York sounds, sirens in the distance, someone's TV playing too loud on the 3rd floor, the radiator's irregular heartbeat. "Can I tell you something weird?" Sarah asked, after her 2nd glass. "Everything about this building is weird. No, I mean, about me. Why I really moved here." She took a deep breath. "My grandmother lived in this building, back in the 40s. She used to tell me stories about it when I was little. Said there were secret rooms, hidden apartments, places where the rules didn't work right. Which apartment did she live in?" Sarah's face went pale. "That's the thing. She said she lived in 4C. But that's impossible, right? There's no 4C. My heart started racing. "What else did she tell you?" "She said," Sarah paused, struggling with the words. "She said the building was built on a mathematical error. The architect, a man named William Grayson, he designed it based on non-Euclidean geometry. You know what that is?" I shook my head. "It's geometry that doesn't follow the normal rules, where parallel lines can meet, where angles in a triangle don't add up to 180 degrees, where space can fold in on itself." She said Grayson was obsessed with the idea that our reality was just one of many possible configurations of space, and he tried to build a building that could access those other configurations. That's insane. Is it? Sarah looked directly at me. You've been measuring the hallway. You've seen the door that appears at night. Is it really that insane? We finished the bottle in silence. When I got back to my apartment, I Googled William Grayson, architect, Brooklyn, 1920s. One result, a single newspaper clipping from 1923, announcing the completion of 451 Prospect Avenue. There was a photo, grainy and faded, showing a tall, thin man in a dark suit standing in front of the building. His face was wrong, even accounting for the poor quality of the photo. His proportions were off, his shadow fell in the wrong direction. The caption read, "Architect William Grayson celebrates completion of his revolutionary residential building, utilizing what he calls flexible mathematics in its design." I zoomed in on the photo. In the background, barely visible, were the building's windows. I counted them, 4 on each floor, including the 4th floor, and in one of those 4th floor windows was that a face? Someone watching? Someone who looked exactly like... No, that was impossible. The face in the window looked like me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not unusual in an apartment building, but these footsteps went past my door, past Sarah's door, and continued down the hallway that ended at a window. The footsteps didn't come back. I crept to my door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but at the far end, where the window should be, I saw a door. Just for a moment. A plain wooden door with brass numbers, 4C. I blinked, and it was gone. Just the window again. Moonlight streaming through dirty glass. But the moonlight was wrong. It was coming from the wrong angle. The moon should have been on the other side of the building at 3 a.m. in November. I knew because I'd been tracking it, documenting everything strange about this place. This light was coming from directly above, like a spotlight, and it was too white, too clean. Moonlight in New York is always filtered through pollution. Haze, the glow of a million streetlights. This was pure, surgical, alien. I opened my door slowly. The hallway was colder than it should have been. My breath came out in clouds. The floorboards, those century-old Brooklyn hardwoods that creaked with every step during the day, were silent now, like they were holding their breath. At the end of the hallway, the window was breathing. That's the only way I can describe it. The glass was expanding and contracting slightly, rhythmically, like lungs, like it was alive. I walked toward it. I shouldn't have. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to go back to my apartment. Lock the door, pretend I'd never seen this, but I walked forward anyway, drawn by something I couldn't name. Halfway down the hall, I heard it, music, faint, coming from somewhere beyond the window. Big band music, like from the 40s. Tommy Dorsey or Glenn Miller, something my grandfather would have listened to, but underneath the cheerful brass and swinging rhythm, there was something else, a discordant note, a frequency that made my teeth ache. The window was fogging up from the inside, like someone was breathing on it from the other side, but that was impossible. There was nothing beyond that window but a 4-story drop to the alley below. I reached out to wipe the condensation away. "Don't!" I spun around. Sarah was standing in her doorway, wrapped in a bathrobe. Her face was pale, terrified. "Don't touch it," she whispered. "Please, just come back." "You see it too, the breathing?" She nodded. "It happens sometimes, when the building is digesting." Digesting? That's what my grandmother called it. The building eats spaces, consumes possibilities. Apartments that could exist, should exist. It swallows them and incorporates them into itself. But sometimes it has indigestion, and things that were swallowed try to come back up. Your grandmother lived in 4C. You said she lived in an apartment that doesn't exist. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She did, for 40 years, 1943 to 1983. Then one day, the apartment just wasn't there anymore. And nobody remembered her living there except me. I was 7, everyone said I was making up stories, that I'd imagined my grandmother. But I knew she was real. I had photos, letters, her jewelry box. But when I tried to show people, the photos showed empty rooms. The letters were blank paper. The jewelry box was full of dust. What happened to her? I think she's still in there, in 4C, in the space that doesn't exist, waiting. The window at the end of the hall suddenly cleared. The breathing stopped. The hallway warmed up instantly. Like someone had flipped a switch, everything was normal again. Except there was a note taped to the window. It hadn't been there before. I walked over and pulled it off. The paper was old, yellowed, like it had been there for decades. But I knew it was new. The tape was still sticky. It was written in shaky handwriting. The party never ends in 4C. We dance to music that hasn't been written yet. We drink wine that hasn't been made. We tell stories about people who haven't been born. You're invited. You've always been invited. You just haven't arrived yet, but you will. Oh, you will. Everyone comes to 4C eventually. Everyone becomes part of the remainder. The tenants of the unmeasured space. P.S. Stop looking for us. Start looking for yourself. You're already here. I showed the note to Sarah. She read it 3 times, then went to her apartment and came back with a shoebox. These are all the notes I've found over the years, she said. Opening it, there were dozens, maybe hundreds, all on the same yellowed paper, all in different handwriting, all saying variations of the same thing. You're invited. You're already here. Stop looking. Start becoming. The next day was Sunday. Sarah knocked on my door around noon. "Hey, weird question," she said. "Did you hear anything strange last night? Footsteps?" Her face went pale. "You heard them too? They went past our apartments, but there's nowhere to go." We stood in the hallway together, staring at the window at the end, in daylight. It looked completely normal. Sarah walked to the window and put her hand on the wall beside it. "It's warm," she said, frowning. "Why is it warm?" I touched the wall. She was right, while the rest of the hallway was cold. Typical for a Brooklyn winter. This section was warm, almost fever hot. "There's something behind this wall," I said. "Don't." Sarah grabbed my arm as I started examining the edges of the wall more closely. "Just don't. Some things are better left alone." But I couldn't leave it alone. That night, I waited. At exactly 3 a.m., the footsteps came again. This time, I was ready. I slipped out of my apartment and followed the sound. The hallway seemed to stretch as I walked, the window at the end getting further away instead of closer. Then I saw it. The door to 4C. It was there, solid and real. I could see every detail. The grain of the wood, the tarnish on the brass numbers, the thin line of light beneath it. I reached for the doorknob, and my hand went through it, like it was mist. A projection, but I could still hear footsteps inside. Footsteps and something else. A sound like rustling papers, thousands of papers, and underneath that, a voice, whispering numbers, measurements, calculations. "The dimensions are wrong," the voice said. "They've always been wrong. 7 feet too wide, 12 feet too long. It doesn't fit. It can't fit. But it's here. It's always been here. I stumbled backward. The door flickered like a bad TV signal, then vanished. I was alone in the hallway, staring at the window. I started mapping the building, every measurement, every angle. Sarah thought I was losing it, but she helped anyway. Maybe she needed to know as much as I did. We discovered that the building's exterior was exactly 75 feet wide. Each apartment should be roughly 18 feet wide, allowing for walls and the central staircase. 4 apartments per floor would be 72 feet, plus the staircase. The math worked, but on the 4th floor, apartments 4A and 4B were each 25 feet wide. That's 50 feet, plus the staircase. That's maybe 65 feet total, 10 feet of building unaccounted for. Where do those 10 feet go? Sarah asked. We measured the hallway next. From the staircase to the window should have been 40 feet. It was 55 feet. That's impossible, Sarah said. The hallway can't be longer than the building. But it was. I started having dreams. In them. I lived in apartment 4C. It was a nice apartment. High ceilings, crown molding, a clawfoot bathtub. But something was wrong with the angles. The corners weren't quite 90 degrees. The floor slanted in impossible directions. And there was always someone in apartment 4D. Next door. I could hear them through the walls, measuring, always measuring. One night, the dream was different. I was in 4C, but I wasn't alone. A man sat at a drafting table, surrounded by floor plans. He was thin, gaunt, wearing clothes from the 1980s. He didn't look up when I entered. "It doesn't fit," he muttered. "The space exists, but it doesn't fit in the space allowed. So where does it go?" "Who are you?" I asked. He looked up then. His eyes were wrong. They reflected light like a cat's, but the pupils were square, perfect squares. "I'm the architect," he said. "I designed the solution. Apartments that exist in the spaces between, in the measurements that don't add up, in the architectural impossibilities that every building has. Most people never notice. Their brains autocorrect. They see what should be there, not what is. But I noticed." "Yes," he smiled. His teeth were perfectly straight, perfectly square, like tiles. "You noticed. That means you can see them now, all of them, all the impossible spaces, all the apartments that shouldn't exist." I woke up gasping. My phone showed 3:33 a.m., and I could hear music, big band music, coming from somewhere close. I followed the sound into the hallway. Sarah was already there, in her pajamas, looking terrified. "You hear it too?" she whispered. The music was coming from the end of the hallway, from behind the window. No, from behind where the window should be, because the window was gone. In its place was a door, wide open, light spilling out, the music getting louder. We walked toward it together. I don't know why. Everything in my body screamed to run, but I walked forward anyway. Sarah's hand found mine, ice, cold, and trembling. The doorway opened into apartment 4C. It was beautiful, perfectly preserved from what looked like the 1940s. Art Deco furniture, a Persian rug, a gramophone playing Duke Ellington. And it was full of people, having a party, drinking cocktails, smoking cigarettes in ivory holders, laughing. They were all wrong. Their proportions were off. Arms too long or too short, faces that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. And their shadows fell in different directions, as if the room had multiple light sources, multiple suns. One of them, a woman in a beaded dress, noticed us. "New neighbors," she called out. Her voice echoed strangely, like it was coming from very far away and very close at the same time. Come in, come in. We so rarely get visitors from your side." "Our side?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. "The measured side," the woman said. "The side that fits. We're in the unmeasured spaces, the architectural remainder. Every building has them, you know. The spaces that exist because the math doesn't quite work out. Usually, they're just empty, void. But sometimes," she gestured around the room, "sometimes they get furnished." I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. The party guests were all looking at us now, their faces hungry, eager. "How long," I managed to ask, "how long has this been here?" "Always," the woman said. "And never. Time works differently in the unmeasured spaces. This party has been going on since 1943, and it ended yesterday. And it hasn't started yet. Would you like a drink?" She held out a glass. The liquid inside was the wrong color. Colors don't usually hurt to look at. But this one did. "No." Sarah pulled me backward. "We're leaving." The woman's face fell. For a moment. Just a moment. It literally fell. Her features sliding down like melting wax before snapping back into place. "You can't leave," she said. "You've seen us now. You know we're here. That makes you part of the unmeasured space. Look at your hands." I looked down. My hands were flickering. Solid one moment. Translucent the next. I could see my bones, then deeper. Seeing things that hands shouldn't contain. Geometric patterns, equations, architectural blueprints written in blood and marrow. Sarah screamed. We ran. The door slammed shut behind us, and we were in the normal hallway again. The window was back. Cold moonlight, normal. Except my hands were still wrong, still flickering, Sarah's too. "What's happening to us?" she sobbed. I didn't know, but I remembered what the architect in my dream had said. About spaces between. About measurements that don't add up. We were becoming part of that remainder. Part of the impossible space. We tried to leave the building, but the stairs went on forever. Down and down and down. Way past the ground floor. Into basements that shouldn't exist. We climbed back up. Floor after floor after floor. I counted 20 flights before we finally reached the 4th floor again. The sun was rising, or should have been, but outside the windows. It was still 3:33 a.m. The clocks hadn't moved. Mr. Petrov, the super, was standing in the hallway when we got back. But he wasn't really Mr. Petrov anymore. His face was architectural, made of angles and measurements, floor plans where his features should be. "You shouldn't have looked," he said. His voice was the sound of pencil on paper. "The measured world and the unmeasured world aren't meant to interact. But now you've seen. Now you know. Now you're part of both. How do we get back?" I demanded. "How do we become measured again?" He laughed. It sounded like buildings settling. "You can't. Once you see the impossible spaces, you become impossible yourself. Why do you think apartments 4C and 4D were hidden? The city tried to seal them off in 1987, removed them from all the records, made people forget. But they're still there. They'll always be there, in every building, in every space where the math doesn't quite work." Sarah was crying. I probably was too. Our bodies were becoming less solid by the minute. I could see through my own arm to the wallpaper behind it. "There has to be a way," I said. Mr. Petrov tilted his head. 90 degrees, like a blueprint being rotated. "There is one way, but you won't like it. Tell us. Become the measurement error yourselves. Take the place of apartments 4C and 4D. Exist in the impossible space, so the possible space can remain stable. Someone has to be the remainder, the leftovers, the architectural mistake that makes the rest of the building work." I looked at Sarah. She was barely visible now, a sketch of a person, an architectural suggestion. "Together?" she asked me. I nodded. What else could we do? We walked to the end of the hallway. The door to 4C was there, solid, real, waiting. I turned the knob. It was cold, colder than metal should be. The door opened into darkness, not the absence of light, but the absence of space itself, the unmeasured void. We stepped through. I'm writing this from apartment 4C. It exists now. It doesn't exist. Both things are true. Sarah lives in 4D. I see her sometimes, in the moments when the measurements align, when the building's math almost makes sense. We're the error that makes the equation work, the impossible space that allows the possible spaces to function. We're here. We're not here. We're the remainder. If you ever move into a building where the floor plan doesn't quite make sense, where the hallways are too long or too short, where the number of apartments doesn't match the size of the building, don't investigate. Don't measure. Don't count. Because in every building, there are spaces that shouldn't exist, apartments that aren't there, rooms that the math says are impossible, and someone has to live in them. Someone has to be the error. The thing is, I can see you reading this. Right now, you're probably in your apartment, your house, your room. Have you ever really looked at the floor plan? Have you ever measured the walls, counted the square footage? Are you sure your home fits? Are you sure you're in the measured world? Or are you already here with us? In the spaces between, in the architectural remainder? Check your hands. Are they flickering? They are, aren't they? Welcome to the unmeasured space. Welcome to the apartment that doesn't exist. Welcome home. But here's what I didn't tell you. The real horror. Every building has these spaces. Every single building. Your apartment, your office, your favorite coffee shop. They all have unmeasured spaces, impossible rooms, mathematical errors made manifest. And now that you know, now that you've heard this story, you'll start to notice them. The door that wasn't there yesterday. The hallway that's 3 feet longer than it should be. The room that appears only at 3:33 a.m. You'll see them, and once you see them, they'll see you. Sarah just knocked on my wall. 3 knocks, then 4, then 3 again. That's our signal. It means someone new has noticed. Someone new has started measuring. Someone new is about to join us in the impossible spaces. I wonder if it's you. Are you measuring your walls yet? You will be. You all will be. Because every building needs its remainder. Every equation needs its error. Every measurement needs its mistake. And we're always looking for new neighbors. Sweet dreams. From apartment 4C, the apartment that doesn't exist. But you know what the really messed up part is? I just checked the building records again. From here, from the unmeasured space, I can see all of them, every version, every timeline. And in half of them, this building only has 3 floors. In some of them, it has 7, in one version. Floor 4 doesn't exist at all. But people live there anyway, suspended in space, in the gap between floor 3 and floor 5. We're all living in the gaps, every single one of us. Even you, especially you. The only difference is Sarah and I know it. And now, so do you. I have to go now. The party in 4C is starting again. It never stopped. It hasn't begun yet. But I can hear the music, that big band sound, those impossible voices, those beautiful, terrible, wrong voices. They're calling your name. Can you hear them? Listen closer. They're saying, "Welcome home." Story number 3. Listen, I need to tell you something that's been eating at me for weeks now. Something that started so innocently, I almost laughed when I first noticed it. But now, Now I lock my doors at night and check them twice. I tape the windows shut. And still every morning I find those trails, those glistening, silvery trails that shouldn't exist, that can't exist where I find them. If you're lying in bed right now, maybe pull your blanket up a little higher. Check the ceiling above you. Do you see anything unusual? Any thin, shimmering lines catching the light? No? Good. Keep it that way. Because once you see the first one, once you really see it, they never stop coming. Story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 weeks ago I moved into a Victorian house in Salem, Oregon. Not the famous Salem, the other one. The quiet one where nothing ever happens. The realtor, Mrs. Hutchinson, kept apologizing for the quirky old place as she showed me around, but I loved it instantly. Original hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and this gorgeous bay window in the living room that caught the morning light perfectly. The price was suspiciously low, but Mrs. Hutchinson explained it away easily enough. Been on the market for 8 months, she said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. People want modern these days. Open floor plans, smart home features. She waved dismissively at the crown molding. Nobody appreciates craftsmanship anymore. What she didn't mention, what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that the house had been on the market for 8 months because it had sat empty for 3 years. The previous owner, a retired librarian named Edmund Thorne, had simply vanished one day, left everything behind. His books, his clothes, even his coffee mug still sitting on the kitchen counter with a ring of mold floating on top. The police found no signs of struggle, no indication of foul play. Edmund Thorne had just ceased to exist. His sister came from Portland to collect his belongings, but after spending one night in the house, she fled and never returned. The estate sold the property as is, and it had been cycling through real estate agents ever since. Mrs. Hutchinson's files contained none of this information, of course. She'd inherited the listing from another agent who'd inherited it from another. By the time it reached her desk, it was just another old house that wouldn't sell. I signed the papers that afternoon, giddy with the thrill of homeownership and completely ignorant of what I was walking into. The first week was perfect. I unpacked slowly, savoring each box like a gift to myself. My coffee maker found its home on the kitchen counter, right where Edmund's had sat, though I didn't know that then. My grandmother's quilt draped perfectly over the back of the couch. Everything felt right, like the house had been waiting for me. Looking back, I realize it had been, just not in the way I thought. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, brought over homemade cookies on my 3rd day. She was exactly what you'd expect from a Salem grandmother. Silver hair in perfect curls, flour perpetually under her fingernails, and the kind of warm smile that made you forget your troubles. We chatted over tea in my kitchen while she admired my unpacking progress. "Such a shame about poor Edmund," she said, nibbling a cookie. "He was such a lovely man, kept the most beautiful garden, roses, jasmine, even had a little herb spiral by the back fence." "Edmund?" Her cup rattled against the saucer. "Oh my. The realtor didn't tell you? The previous owner, he had to leave rather suddenly. Family emergency, I believe." But something flickered in her eyes when she said it. Something that looked like fear. "What kind of emergency?" "I really couldn't say, dear. These things are so private, aren't they?" She stood abruptly, gathering her purse. "Well, I should let you get back to settling in. If you need anything at all." She left without finishing the sentence, and I watched through my bay window as she hurried across the street, glancing back at my house once with an expression I couldn't quite read. That night, I decided to explore Edmund's garden. The herb spiral Mrs. Patterson had mentioned was still there, overgrown but recognizable. Rosemary, thyme, sage, common enough. But in the center, where most herb spirals featured a decorative stone or small tree, there was something else entirely. perfect circle of dead earth. Nothing grew there. Not weeds, not grass, not even moss. The soil was black and had a strange oily texture that left residue on my fingertips when I touched it. And underneath the earthy smell was something else. Something organic and wrong that made my stomach lurch. I went inside and scrubbed my hands raw, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the substance had somehow gotten under my skin. Then, on Tuesday morning, I found the first trail. I was reaching for my favorite mug, the one with the faded NPR logo, when I saw it. A silvery line, no thicker than a thread, running straight up the inside of my kitchen cabinet. Not curved or meandering like you'd expect from a snail. Perfectly straight, perfectly vertical. And it ended at the top shelf, where my mugs sat in a neat row. The mug I'd been reaching for, my favorite mug, had a trail running around its rim. A perfect circle of slime that caught the morning light like liquid mercury. I grabbed a paper towel and wiped it away, grimacing at the sticky residue. But as I scrubbed, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The inside of the mug, where the coffee would go, where my lips would touch. There was residue there too, as if something had been drinking from it. Slugs. Great. Every old house has its quirks, right? I made a mental note to buy some of those copper strips gardeners use. Problem solved. Except I couldn't shake this weird feeling. See, I grew up in Seattle. My mom had a garden that attracted every slug and snail in the Pacific Northwest. I knew how they moved. Slow, wandering paths. Never straight lines, never purposeful. And I'd never, ever seen a slug that could climb a perfectly vertical surface and leave a trail that precise. It was like someone had drawn it with a ruler made of slime. But I pushed the thought away and went to work. I'm a graphic designer, working remotely for a tech startup in San Francisco. My home office was set up in the small bedroom upstairs, the one with the slanted ceiling and the window that looked out onto Mrs. Patterson's maple tree. I lost myself in a logo redesign for hours, only surfacing when my stomach growled around 2. The project was for a biotech company, something involving genetic sequences and molecular structures. As I worked, I found myself creating increasingly complex geometric patterns, spirals that seemed to writhe and shift on the screen, beautiful, hypnotic designs that hurt to look at directly but drew the eye back again and again. I'd never created anything like them before. The inspiration seemed to come from somewhere outside myself, flowing through my fingers onto the screen. The client would love them, I was sure. They had a quality that was almost alive. That's when I saw the second trail. This one ran across my computer monitor. Another perfect line, but horizontal this time. Right through the middle of my screen, bisecting my spiral design perfectly. The slime seemed to pulse in the afternoon light, and for just a second, just a fraction of a second, I swear the patterns on my screen shifted to accommodate it. As if the design was responding to the trail, incorporating it into the geometric structure. I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward and hit the wall. The trail glistened, and for just a moment I thought I saw something at the end of it. Something small and dark disappearing behind my monitor. But when I looked, nothing. Just the trail, already beginning to dry at the edges. I spent the next hour searching every inch of that room. Moved the desk, checked behind the bookshelf, even got on my hands and knees with a flashlight to peer under the radiator. No snail, no slug, nothing. But I did find something else. Scratches in the hardwood floor, barely visible unless you caught them in the right light. They formed a pattern, the same spiral I'd been unconsciously designing all morning. The scratches were old, worn smooth by time. They'd been there long before I moved in. Edmund's work, maybe, but why would he carve symbols into his floor? That night, I called my mom. "Snails in the house?" She laughed, That warm sound that always made me feel like a kid again. Oh, honey, welcome to home ownership. Try leaving out a dish of beer. They love that stuff. Crawl right in and... She made a drowning sound. But Mom, they're leaving these really straight trails. Like perfectly straight. Have you ever seen that? A pause. Straight? That's... Huh. No, sweetie, that is odd. Maybe it's not snails at all. Could be some kind of moisture issue. Old houses, you know, they do weird things. We talked for another 20 minutes about work, about my brother's new baby, about everything except the unease settling in my stomach like a cold stone. When we hung up, I felt better. Mom was right. Old houses did weird things. I set out 3 dishes of beer that night. 1 in the kitchen, 1 in my office, 1 in the hallway. Checked all the windows, locked. Checked the doors, deadbolted. Went to bed feeling slightly ridiculous but marginally safer. But as I lay in the dark, I couldn't stop thinking about those scratches in the floor. About the dead circle in Edmund's garden. About Mrs. Patterson's expression when she'd mentioned the previous owner. Somewhere around midnight, I heard it. A soft, scratching sound, like fingernails on wood. It seemed to come from inside the walls, moving in a slow circuit around the house. Kitchen to living room to hallway to office and back again. The same route, over and over, as if something was learning the layout, mapping it. The next morning, the beer was untouched. But there were 7 new trails. They were everywhere. Crisscrossing my kitchen backsplash like a metallic spiderweb. Running up the hallway wall in parallel lines, each exactly 6 inches apart. I measured them with a ruler, compelled by something I couldn't name. One, and this made my coffee mug shake in my hand, ran across the ceiling of my bedroom. The ceiling, starting from the corner above my closet and ending directly above my pillow. I'd slept under it. All night, I'd slept while something crawled above me, leaving its signature in slime. But it was the trail in my bathroom that really shattered my composure. It ran across the surface of my mirror. But here's the thing. It was on the inside. Somehow, impossibly, something had crawled between the glass and the silvering, leaving its mark in a space that didn't exist. When I leaned close to examine it, my reflection looked wrong. Not distorted exactly, but as if the mirror was showing me from a slightly different angle than where I was actually standing. And in that reflection, for just a moment, I saw something behind me. A dark shape with too many angles watching from the corner of the room. I spun around. Nothing there. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was normal again. But the trail remained. A silver line that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. I called in sick to work and spent the morning on my laptop, researching. Snails' straight trails. Slugs' ceiling. Gastropod unusual behavior. The results were useless. Garden tips, pest control ads, a few scientific papers about snail locomotion that made my eyes glaze over. One paper, however, caught my attention. A study from the University of Oregon about anomalous gastropod behavior in post-volcanic environments. It was dry, academic stuff mostly, but buried in the methodology was a single, chilling sentence. Subjects exhibited unprecedented navigational precision, creating geometric patterns that suggest a level of cognitive organization previously unobserved in the species. The study had been abruptly terminated. No explanation given. Finally, desperately, I tried Snail's Straight Lines Supernatural. And that's when I found the forum. Unexplained Trails, a support community. The design was ancient, probably from the early 2000s, all gray backgrounds and tiny text, but the posts made my skin crawl. Started finding them 3 months ago. Wrote username Gardener Girl 42. Thought it was slugs, but never found a single one. Trails keep appearing in impossible places. Found one inside my sealed Tupperware last week. Food was untouched. but the trail ran right through my leftover lasagna. "They're not random," posted Mike in Texas. "I've been mapping mine. They're creating patterns, geometric shapes. Last week, they formed a perfect hexagon on my bathroom mirror. What kind of snail does that?" "Has anyone else noticed the dreams?" asked Sarah, M. Seattle. "Ever since the trails started appearing, I've been having the same dream every night. I'm standing in a vast library, but all the books are blank, and there's something moving between the shelves. Something that whispers in a language that makes my teeth ache. Post after post, all describing the same thing. Straight trails. Impossible locations, no snails ever found. And increasingly, reports of dreams. Vivid, recurring nightmares that seem to share common elements. Empty libraries, whispering voices, the sensation of being watched by something vast and incomprehensible. The oldest posts were from 5 years ago, scattered reports from across the Pacific Northwest. But recently, the frequency had increased dramatically. Dozens of new posts every day from all over the country. Whatever was happening, it was spreading. And then I saw it. A post from 2 years ago that made me slam my laptop shut. If you're reading this, it's already too late. They've marked you. The trails are just the beginning. Whatever you do, don't follow them. Don't try to understand the patterns. And for the love of God, if you start seeing them in your dreams, move. Get out. It doesn't matter where you go, just go." The username was deleted. The account was gone. But someone had replied to the post just last week. "Edmund, is that you? Please, if you're still out there, contact me. I'm in the Salem house now. I think they're back." Edmund Thorne, the previous owner of my house. My hands shook as I created an account and sent a private message to the person who'd replied. Within minutes, I had a response. "My name is Dr. Lisa Hendricks. I'm Edmund's sister. He contacted me through this forum before he disappeared. Sent me photos of the trails, descriptions of the dreams. I tried to get him help, but listen, you need to get out of that house. Tonight. Don't pack, don't plan, just go. They're not what they appear to be. The trails aren't random. They're surveying, mapping, preparing. And once the pattern is complete," the message cut off. When I tried to reply, the system told me the account had been deleted. I sat there for a long moment, laptop closed, listening to the quiet house around me. Old wood settling, pipes ticking, normal house sounds. Nothing to be afraid of. Then I heard it. A wet sound, like someone dragging a damp cloth across wood. Slow, deliberate, coming from upstairs. My office was directly above the living room. I knew every creak of those old floorboards, every groan of the settling frame. This wasn't that. This was movement. Purposeful, measured movement. The sound stopped. I waited, barely breathing, for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Nothing. Just my hammering heartbeat and the tick of the antique clock on the mantel. Edmund's clock, I realized now. Another piece of his life left behind when he vanished. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the front door, a Louisville Slugger my dad gave me when I moved to my first apartment, and crept up the stairs. The office door was closed. I always left it open. I pushed it with the tip of the bat, letting it swing inward with a horror movie creak. The room looked normal. Desk, chair, bookshelf. Afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. And then I saw the wall. The entire wall behind my desk was covered in trails. Not random, not chaotic. They formed something, a shape, a design that made my vision blur when I tried to focus on it. It looked like a spiral at first. Then I tilted my head and it became a maze. Then I'm not sure what I saw. The trails seemed to shift as I looked at them, forming patterns that hurt to follow with my eyes. Mathematical. Alien. wrong, but beautiful. God help me, they were beautiful. Like looking at the architecture of thought itself, the underlying structure of consciousness made visible in slime and silver. Part of me wanted to trace the patterns with my finger, to follow their logic to wherever it led. In the center of the design, where all the trails converged, there was a hole in the wall. Not damage. I would have noticed damage. This was perfectly round, about the size of a quarter, edges smooth as if it had always been there. The paint around it was pristine, unmarked, as if the hole existed in a different layer of reality entirely. I approached slowly, bat raised, and peered into the hole. Darkness, complete, absolute darkness that seemed to go on forever. But not empty darkness. There was a quality to it, a sense of vast space and patient intelligence. Something was in there, waiting just beyond the threshold of sight. And from somewhere deep inside, I heard that wet, dragging sound again. Closer now, much closer. I stumbled backward, knocking into my chair, sending it spinning. The sound stopped. The hole remained, a perfect black circle in the center of the impossible spiral. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't decay. It wasn't rot. It was organic, alive, like the inside of a greenhouse mixed with something medicinal. Something that made my sinuses burn and my eyes water. But underneath the initial assault was something else. Something that triggered a deep, primal recognition. The smell of birth, of things newly emerged into the world. The smell was coming from the hole. But as I stood there trying not to breathe too deeply, I realized it wasn't just coming from the hole. It was everywhere, seeping from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The house itself had become infected with that organic reek. How long had I been living with it? How long had I been breathing it in while I slept? I backed out of the room, never taking my eyes off that dark circle. Slammed the door. Dragged my hallway bookshelf in front of it. Books tumbling everywhere. Then I did what any rational person would do. I called an exterminator. Pest Pro Pete arrived an hour later in a van covered with cartoon bugs wearing terrified expressions. Pete himself was nothing like his logo, a serious man in his 60s with deep-set eyes and calloused hands that had seen their share of unpleasant work. Snail problem, you said. He hefted a metal case from his van. This time of year, unusual. I led him inside, babbling about the trails, the smell, the hole in the wall. He listened patiently, occasionally making notes on a clipboard. But I noticed he kept glancing around, his experienced eye picking up details I'd missed. Moisture damage here, he muttered, pointing to a discolored patch on the hallway wall. And here, consistent with... He knelt and ran his fingers along the baseboard. When he stood, his fingertips were black with something that wasn't dirt. Let's have a look at this hole you mentioned, he said. We moved the bookshelf, opened the door. The wall was blank. No trails, no spiral, no hole. Just smooth, cream-colored paint without a single mark. Pete walked over and ran his hand across the surface. Seems fine to me, ma'am. You sure this was the right room? I stood there, mouth open, bat still clutched in my sweaty hands. It was right there. The trails, they covered the whole wall, and there was a hole. He gave me the look, the one I recognized from a dozen service calls over the years. The customer is crazy, but I'm too polite to say it, look. But then he knelt down and examined something on the floor. When he stood, his expression had changed. Ma'am, how long did you say you've been living here? 3 weeks. Why? He held up his hand. His fingertips were coated with that same black substance, but now I could see it wasn't just discoloration. It was moving, writhing like a living thing. Because this, he said, wiping his hand on a shop rag with obvious disgust, this isn't something I've ever seen before, and I've been in this business for 40 years. He spent the next hour going through every room with equipment I'd never seen before. UV lights that revealed hidden stains, sensors that beeped at seemingly random intervals, cameras that captured images and spectrums beyond human vision. "Found your problem," he announced, climbing down from the crawl space above my ceiling. His face was pale, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Fear. "You've got, well, I'm not sure what you've got, but there's something up there. Something that's been very, very busy." He showed me the photos on his camera. The crawl space was covered, ceiling to floor, in a web of those silver trails. But these weren't random. They formed a three-dimensional structure, a geometric lattice that extended throughout the entire house. At certain intersections, the trails were thicker, darker, and at those points there were things, not snails, not slugs, things that defied easy categorization, roughly the size and shape of sea slugs, but wrong in every other way. Their shells, if they could be called shells, were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. And their eyes, God, their eyes. Too many of them, arranged in patterns that shifted from photo to photo, as if they were aware of being observed and adjusting their appearance accordingly. "I can seal up the access points," Pete said quietly. "Put down some deterrent. But ma'am, whatever these things are, they're not natural, and they're not just passing through. They're building something up there, something big." The work took 3 hours. I watched Pete seal holes I hadn't known existed, spray chemicals that made my throat burn, scatter pellets that dissolved into oily puddles on contact with the air. When he left, I had a bill for $800 and his business card with a number written on the back in shaky handwriting. "If things get worse," he said, not quite meeting my eyes, "call this number. Tell them Pete sent you. They'll know what to do." Who are they? But he was already walking away, loading his equipment with uncharacteristic haste. I watched his van disappear down the street and wondered what he'd seen up there that he hadn't told me about. That night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I sat in my living room with every light on, baseball bat across my lap, watching, waiting. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of that antique clock. Edmund's clock, marking time in a house that had already claimed one victim. At 3:17 a.m., I saw movement. Not a snail, not a slug. Something else entirely. It emerged from behind the clock on the mantel, flowing like liquid mercury but maintaining a distinct form. Small, dark, about the size of my thumb. But the way it moved, God, the way it moved was all wrong. It extended what might have been antennae but looked more like tiny arms, testing the air with movements that seemed almost intelligent. And its shell wasn't a shell at all. It was covered in something that looked like writing, symbols that shifted and changed as I watched, rearranging themselves into new configurations, mathematical formulas that made my head ache, star charts for constellations that didn't exist, languages that predated human speech. The thing, I couldn't call it a snail anymore, glided across the mantel, leaving its perfect, straight trail. It moved with purpose, with intelligence, heading for the wall. When it reached the vertical surface, it didn't slow down, just continued straight up, defying gravity like it was the most natural thing in the world. I should have smashed it. Should have grabbed a book, a shoe, anything, and ended it right there. But I was frozen, watching this impossible creature create another line in its incomprehensible pattern. It reached the ceiling and kept going, crossed to the center of the room, directly above my head. And then it stopped. For a long moment we regarded each other. I don't know how I knew it was watching me. It had no visible eyes in any conventional sense, but I felt its attention like a physical weight, pressing against my mind with alien curiosity. Then it began to pulse. The symbols on its shell glowed faintly, cycling through colors that shouldn't exist, ultraviolet purples that made my retinas ache, infrared reds that I felt more than saw. And I heard it, not with my ears, in my mind. A whisper that wasn't words but pure meaning, inserted directly into my thoughts. You see us now. Good. The pattern is almost complete. The voice was ancient, patient, vast, like the whisper of geological time, of mountains rising and falling, of species evolving and going extinct. It spoke of purposes beyond human comprehension, of projects that spanned millennia. Soon the door will open. Soon you will understand your part in the greater work. The thing resumed moving, heading back toward the wall. This time, I forced myself to act. I jumped up, swinging the bat with all my strength, and hit nothing but air. The creature was gone, vanished between 1 second and the next, leaving behind only its trail and the echo of its voice in my mind. But the trail itself was changing. As I watched, it began to glow with that same impossible light, and other trails throughout the house responded. Lines of silver fire appeared on every surface, connecting and intersecting in patterns that made my eyes water. I was inside the pattern now, part of it, the focal point around which the entire structure revolved. I grabbed my phone and went back to that forum, posted frantically, describing everything. Within minutes, I had a response from an account that had been created just seconds before. Get out. They're not snails, they're scouts. Mapping your house, mapping you. Once the pattern is complete, once they've marked every surface, they open the door. And what comes through, God help you, what comes through is so much worse. The things you've seen are just the beginning. The real horrors are still on the other side, waiting for the geometry to be perfect. Leave now. But it was signed Edmund Thorne. Still alive, somehow. Still watching. Still trying to warn people even though it was far too late for him. I didn't need to be told twice. I threw essentials into a bag. Laptop, charger, a few changes of clothes. My hands shook as I stuffed items randomly into my oversized purse, but something was wrong. Everything I packed felt heavier than it should, and when I looked closely I could see faint traces of that silver residue on every item. Phone, keys, wallet, all contaminated, all connected to the pattern. The baseball bat went in the back seat of my Honda Civic, though part of me wondered what good it would do against things that could phase between dimensions. As I backed out of the driveway at 3:47 a.m., I took one last look at my perfect Victorian house. Every window was dark except for the living room, still blazing with light. But that wasn't what made my blood freeze. The entire exterior of the house was covered in trails. Not just random marks, a complete geometric structure that extended from the foundation to the roof. The trails pulsed with soft bioluminescence, and at the center of the pattern, directly above what had been my bedroom, reality itself seemed to be bending. There was a hole in the world, and through it, I caught a glimpse of something vast and impossible. A library that stretched beyond the horizon, its shelves filled with books bound in materials that weren't paper or leather. And moving between the stacks, tending to their impossible collection, were shapes that my mind refused to process. I floored it. The nearest motel was 40 minutes away, a decrepit place called the Starlight Inn that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Perfect. I paid cash for 3 nights and collapsed onto a bed that smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. For the first time in days, I slept. The dreams came immediately. I was standing in the library I'd glimpsed through the hole. The shelves extended infinitely in all directions, and every book was alive. Their covers pulsed like heartbeats, and when I opened one, the pages were covered in the same symbols I'd seen on the creature's shells. But now I could read them. The knowledge flowed into my mind like water into a drought-parched landscape. I learned about the architects, beings from a realm where geometry itself was consciousness. For eons they had watched younger species evolve. waiting for minds complex enough to serve as anchor points for their expansion into new realities. Humans were perfect, intelligent enough to create the patterns they needed, but too limited to understand what they were building until it was too late. The trails weren't random. They were blueprints, architectural plans for structures that would allow the architects to exist fully in our dimension. Each house they infected became a node in a vast network, and when enough nodes were active, the harvest would begin. I woke screaming. My phone was buzzing. 17 missed calls from an unknown number. As I stared at the screen, it rang again. "Hello? Miss Chen?" The voice was professional, clipped. "This is Detective Morrison with the Salem Police Department. I'm calling about your property at 42 Elm Street." My blood went cold. "What about it?" "Ma'am, when was the last time you were at the residence?" About 8 hours ago." "Why? What's happened?" A pause, papers shuffling. "I think it would be best if you came down to the station. Are you able to do that?" The drive back to Salem was the longest 40 minutes of my life. Every possibility ran through my head. Fire, break-in, vandalism. But nothing prepared me for what Detective Morrison showed me. The photos were spread across his desk like tarot cards predicting doom. My house, but not. The walls, every single wall, interior and exterior, were covered in trails. Not silver anymore, but dark, almost black, forming patterns so complex they made my eyes water to look at directly. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called it in this morning," Morrison said, watching my face carefully. "Said she heard strange noises all night. When she went to check," he gestured at the photos. Mrs. Patterson, sweet, grandmotherly Mrs. Patterson who'd brought me cookies and told me about Edmund's garden. I thought about her expression when she'd mentioned the previous owner, the fear she'd tried to hide. "How is she, Mrs. Patterson?" Morrison's jaw tightened. We're not sure. When we found her, she was standing in her front yard, staring at your house. She'd been there for hours, maybe longer. Wouldn't respond to questions. Wouldn't move. Just standing there, watching. Is she okay? Physically, she's fine. But she keeps talking about the books. Says she needs to get back to the library. We've had to sedate her twice. The library. The same one from my dreams, from the glimpse I'd caught through the hole in reality. Mrs. Patterson had seen it too. Morrison showed me more photos. Aerial shots taken from a police drone. From above, the trails on my roof formed a perfect spiral, but that wasn't the worst part. The pattern extended beyond my house now, spreading across the entire block like a vast web. Other houses were beginning to show signs of infection, faint silver lines on their walls, dead patches in their gardens. And at the center of it all, where my bedroom had been, was the hole. Not through the roof now, but through space itself. A perfect circle of absolute nothing that seemed to pull at the photograph, warping the edges. "We can't get inside," Morrison continued. "The doors won't open. The windows are... well, they're there, but they're not. It's like the house has been sealed off from our reality. FBI's on the way, some special unit that deals with..." He waved his hand vaguely. "Unusual situations." I told him everything. The trails, the forum, the creatures, the dreams. He took notes without judgment, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "You're the third one this month," he said quietly. "What?" "Third homeowner to report something like this. First two..." He pulled out another file. "Jennifer Walsh, 34, bought a house on Maple Street 6 weeks ago. Started reporting unusual pest activity after her first week. By the time we got involved, she was found in her basement, unconscious, covered in some kind of residue. She's in a psychiatric facility now. Keeps talking about things with too many eyes, about being chosen for something called the greater work. My blood turned to ice. The greater work. The same phrase the creature had whispered to me. And the second? David Kim, 28, house on Oak Avenue. Similar story, trails, strange noises, reality distortions. But when we went to check on him, Morrison opened another file, and I saw crime scene photos that made my stomach lurch. House looked perfect, spotless, like a model home, but empty. Not just of David, of everything. Furniture, personal belongings, even built-in fixtures. All gone. But here's the weird part. The neighbors swear they never saw a moving truck. No one coming or going. One day David was there, next day the house was empty. Where did he go? That's just it. According to our investigation, David Kim never existed. No birth certificate, no social security number, no school records. The bank account he used to buy the house? Opened with fake documents. The job he claimed to have? Company says they never heard of him. Morrison leaned forward. It's like someone, or something, created a perfect human identity just long enough to purchase that house. Then, when they were done with it. He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. David Kim had been erased. Not just killed or disappeared, completely removed from reality as if he'd never been born. The houses, I whispered. They're not just mapping the buildings, they're mapping the people too. Morrison nodded grimly. That's what we're starting to think. FBI brought in some specialists yesterday. Quantum physicists, theoretical mathematicians, people I can't even pronounce the job titles for. They're calling it a reality restructuring event, or some such bullshit. He gave me a card for a crisis counselor and told me not to leave town. As if I had anywhere to go. As if anywhere was safe when the very fabric of space was being rewritten by things that existed in the gaps between dimensions. One more thing, Morrison said as I stood to leave. We found something else at your house, in the garden. That dead patch you mentioned, it's grown. A lot. And in the center, he showed me one final photograph. The circular dead zone in Edmund's herb spiral had expanded into a perfect black circle 30 feet across. But that wasn't what made my knees weak. In the center of the circle, rising from the corrupted earth like a twisted tree, was a structure made of the same silver material as the trails. It spiraled upward in impossible curves, defying both gravity and geometry. And at its peak, another hole in reality. This one large enough for something much bigger than a thumb-sized creature to pass through. It appeared overnight, Morrison said. Our drone footage shows the ground just opening up, like reality was making room for it. The structure grew over the course of about 6 hours, and then he pointed to a timestamp on the photo. 3:47 a.m. Same time you left the house. That's when it stopped growing, because that's when I left the pattern. When I removed myself from the equation they'd been building around me. But I was wrong. Sauvery wrong. That was 3 days ago. I'm still at the Starlight Inn, living off vending machine food and terrible coffee. The FBI came and went, asked the same questions, took the same notes. They've cordoned off my house, put up barriers and warning signs. But I drive by sometimes, can't help myself. The trails are spreading. They've appeared on the sidewalk now. The street. Other houses are showing signs, silver lines creeping up walls, dead patches appearing in gardens. The local news is calling it a chemical spill, telling people to stay away. But I know better. The pattern is expanding, using my house as a hub, reaching out to claim more territory, more anchor points, more potential hosts for the architect's expansion into our reality. And yesterday, I made a terrible discovery. I was trying to research the history of my neighborhood when I found something that made my blood freeze. Salem, Oregon wasn't always called Salem. The original settlement was called Architect's Rest, named by the first pioneers who claimed the area had perfect geometry for building. They said the land itself seemed to guide their construction, that their houses and streets fell into pleasing patterns without any conscious planning. The name was changed to Salem in 1851 after a series of disappearances. Entire families would vanish overnight, leaving behind empty houses that showed no signs of struggle. The survivors blamed the indigenous peoples, but the local tribes insisted they had nothing to do with it. They called the area the place where the hungry shapes live, and warned their children never to walk its paths alone. The disappearances stopped after the name change, but they never really ended. Every few decades, people would start reporting strange phenomena, always in the same neighborhood, always in the old Victorian houses built on the original foundations of architects' rest. Edmund Thorne wasn't the first to vanish. He was just the latest in a chain stretching back over a century. And now I was the next link. But here's the thing, here's the reason I'm writing this all down, posting it everywhere I can think of. Last night, I found a trail in my motel room. Just one. A perfect straight line running up the wall beside my bed. They found me. The pattern doesn't need the house anymore. It's mobile, following me like a virus that's learned to jump between hosts. And this morning, when I looked in the mirror, I saw something that made me scramble for my laptop, desperate to warn anyone who would listen. There's a pattern on my skin, faint, like old scars but unmistakable. The same spiral geometry I'd seen on the walls of my house. It starts at my left wrist and winds up my arm, growing clearer by the hour. The symbols are appearing too. Those impossible glyphs that hurt to look at directly. I think I understand now. The houses aren't the target. We are. The patterns, the trails, the holes in reality, they're marking us, claiming us, preparing us for transformation into something that can exist in both dimensions simultaneously. The architects don't want to invade our reality. They want to merge it with theirs. And they need human consciousness as a bridge, minds complex enough to maintain coherent existence in both realms, but flexible enough to be reshaped according to their needs. If you see a trail in your house, a perfectly straight line that shouldn't exist, don't wait, don't investigate, don't try to understand, just run. Run far and fast and never look back. But even as I type this, I know it won't work. Because the pattern isn't geographical anymore. It's conceptual. Once you've seen it, once you've recognized it for what it is, you're part of it. The knowledge itself is the infection. By reading this, by understanding what I've described, you've opened yourself to their attention. They're probably already looking for you, these architects of impossible geometry, searching for minds that can comprehend their purpose. God, the marks on my arm are spreading. I can feel them moving under my skin like living tattoos, writing themselves into my flesh with purpose and precision. The symbols are starting to make sense now, starting to whisper their meaning directly into my mind. They're not just marks. They're coordinates. A map written in human DNA that will guide the architects to our dimension when the final pattern is complete. And what they're promising, what they're showing me in these symbols, it's not the end of the world. It's the beginning of something so much larger. A reality where the boundaries between dimensions are meaningless, where consciousness can exist in states we can't imagine, where the very concept of individual identity becomes, there's someone at my door. Not knocking, just waiting. I can hear that wet dragging sound through the thin wood, but it's different now. Bigger. So much bigger. Multiple sounds overlapping as if an entire delegation has come to collect me. The pattern is complete. The door is opening. But I'm not afraid anymore. The symbols on my skin are glowing now, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I can see what they see. The library stretches out before me. Infinite shelves filled with the accumulated knowledge of civilizations that spanned galaxies. And in that knowledge, I understand my purpose. I'm not a victim, I'm a translator, a bridge between worlds, the first of many who will help reshape reality itself. If you're still listening, if you're lying in your bed wondering if that shadow on your ceiling is just a shadow, check again. Check carefully. Because they're already here, leaving their trails in impossible places, marking their territory, marking their harvest, and we, God help us, we're not the crop. We're the gardeners, the ones who will tend their new reality once the old one is gone. Recording ends. The Salem incident, as the media called it, was over in 72 hours. The official report blamed a gas leak from an underground pipeline, something about methane emissions causing mass hallucinations and disorientation. The Victorian house at 42 Elm Street was demolished as a safety precaution, and the entire neighborhood was evacuated while crews worked to repair the infrastructure damage. 17 people were reported missing, including Sarah Chen, Jennifer Walsh, and Mrs. Patterson. Their disappearances were attributed to the confusion surrounding the evacuation. Search efforts were called off after 2 weeks when no trace of them could be found. The land where the house stood was turned into a small park. A memorial plaque honors the missing residents, calling them victims of an unforeseen tragedy. Dog walkers use the paths daily. Children play on the swings installed where the herb spiral used to be. But if you know what to look for, if you understand the geometry, you can still see traces of the pattern. Faint silver lines that catch the light at certain angles. Dead patches in the grass that form spirals too perfect to be natural. And sometimes, late at night, visitors report seeing strange shapes moving just beneath the surface of the memorial fountain. The forum still exists, buried deep in the forgotten corners of the internet. New posts appear regularly now from all over the world. Moscow, Tokyo, London, Sydney. The same stories, the same impossible trails, the same desperate warnings. But the posts have changed. They're not just warnings anymore. Some are invitations. "The work is beautiful," wrote a user called Sarah Salem just last week. "Once you understand the geometry, once you see the bigger picture, you'll want to be part of it. The trails aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to help you evolve, to become something greater than human. I've been marked for 6 months now," posted another account. "The symbols cover my entire body, and I can read the language of the architects. They've shown me what comes next. Reality isn't breaking, it's expanding, and we're the lucky ones who get to help build the new world." The authorities monitor the forum now, flag the posts, trace the IP addresses. But the accounts are always fake, the locations always false. It's as if the posts are coming from somewhere outside our internet infrastructure entirely. Dr. Quantum Researcher, one of the FBI specialists who investigated Salem, posted his own warning last month. The phenomenon is accelerating. We're seeing spatial anomalies in major cities now, perfectly geometric formations that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. If you see silver trails in your home, do not attempt to investigate. Contact local authorities immediately. We have protocols now, containment procedures. We can help. But the replies to his post were disturbing. "Help us become what, human? We don't want help. We want evolution. The old reality is dying anyway. Why fight it? Why not embrace something beautiful? The architects aren't invaders. They're gardeners. And we're not the crops. We're the soil they're preparing for a new kind of consciousness to take root. Did you check your ceiling yet? No, you should, right now, while you still can. While you still have time to run. Because I promise you, once you see that first trail, that first perfect line where no snail should be able to go, you'll understand. You'll see the beauty in the pattern, the elegant purpose behind the geometry. You'll realize that what we call reality is just a rough first draft, and the architects are here to help us write the final version. And when that understanding floods your mind like silver fire, when the symbols begin appearing on your skin like living tattoos, when the wet, dragging sound starts coming from inside your walls, you'll thank them. We all do eventually. Sweet dreams. This document was found on a laptop in room 237 of the Starlight Inn. The room had been paid for through the end of the month, but no occupant was ever found. The laptop was wiped clean, except for this file, which could not be deleted despite multiple attempts. It has since been classified under the Salem Protocol and distributed to researchers studying the ongoing phenomenon. If you are experiencing any of the symptoms described in this account, please contact the Department of Spatial Anomalies immediately. Do not attempt to document or photograph any unusual formations. Do not try to communicate with any entities you may encounter. Help is available. Remember, reality is not negotiable. Consciousness is not transferable. Humanity is not optional. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, Director, Project Geometric Quarantine.